Hey there, and welcome to a super off-the-cuff video where I'm going to talk about my history with mobile phones and particularly gaming on mobile phones. My first few mobile phones when I was growing up were not necessarily designed for gaming. In fact, they were just designed for making texts and calls. I think I had this Motorola, I can't quite remember, but it was a gift from my mum for my birthday and I was over the moon about it. A year or so later, I was actually given by a friend one of these. This is a Nokia 3330. I actually had the 3310, which was the sort of the version of this phone which didn't have WAP capabilities and it was missing a game. But this is the 3330 and it's pretty much identical to the 3310, so much so that you can use the same cases and stuff. And on this phone, there were some games that were built into it that I played a lot. They were good. Snake 2 is really good. Space Impact really good. Bumper's really good. They're all really good games. But this wasn't what drew me to this phone. What actually drew me to this phone was something a little bit cooler. Because of the interchangeable custom faceplate and covers, you could actually get some pretty niche and pretty cool things for them. For example, this one's cool feature was the fact that you could actually put a game system on the back of your phone, which is kind of crazy. The whole idea is that the device itself taps into your mobile phone's battery and doesn't require its own batteries. And this is basically one of those 99-in-1 block games, which is pretty cool to say the least, just to have a few extra games on the back of your phone, which is pretty sweet. You can scroll through the different game types here and it tells you what games you've got. Well, it just gives you an alphabet all the way to the end. You can change levels and stuff and add stage levels and stuff, which is pretty cool. I actually have the box for this, and if we look at the back of the box here, it says here we got car racing, flying car, ping pong, and Space Impact and Tetris. Now, the one that caught my eye when I was a kid was the fact that it had something called Space Impact, which was a game that was already on the Nokia. So I was really interested in playing Space Impact on this to see if it was any different. And so when I got the game, I realized quite quickly that this was not necessarily actually Space Impact. It was just a space shooter clone in which, block shooter clone in which you can't actually see your bullets at all. Which is kind of cool. As I said, the cool way that this worked is it's just one of those interchangeable phone cases. So you can just remove them, but this cable here just taps into the battery supply of your phone, of your Nokia. So it doesn't actually require its own power source. It just taps into this one, which is pretty nifty. Now, the reason I had this was because around this time, the Nokia N-Gage had come out, and I desperately wanted one of them, but my family couldn't afford it, and I was still like a very young teenager, around 13 years old. I inherited a camera phone. It was one of these roller phone cameras from NEC. It was on a 3 pay-as-you-go thing. I had that for a little while, and I eventually convinced a friend of mine to trade his N-Gage for my camera phone and MP3 player. So I actually picked up a Nokia N-Gage in 2003, which is pretty sweet. Yeah, this is really cool. So the games for this device are inserted. You have to take the battery out to put the games in, and that resets the clock and stuff, which was a bit of a bummer. But you know, it was really, really cool. And the games, they were physical games. They came in these boxes, or kind of like half the size of a DVD case. Kind of very close size to PS Vita games now. And they came on little cards that are shaped like SD cards, but are in fact a different type of memory called MMC cards. And these, the ones that were released in boxes, weren't rewritable; they were read only. And so I had this thing, and I had a couple of games for it, but I was really awakened by this thing when I discovered that you could. There was a lot of cracked games online. You could just play any game really without having to worry about paying for them. Back in the day, I was a kid, so you know, free games are still games. So yeah, I was just having a playthrough quite a lot of these games. They were just online. There's a few free ones like Snake that was free already, and a few others. These were compatible with some S60 games and also Java games. I think I might not have any installed on here. Let's have a quick look. No, I don't have any Java games installed on this device. But the other cool thing is you might be able to see here is emulators. Now, emulators are interesting because you can actually emulate quite a lot of systems. This is only a handful of systems I have on here. You can emulate Nintendo and Game Boy pretty well. You can also emulate Super Nintendo and Game Boy Advance, but it is very, very slow. So the meat of it was really, the Game Boy emulation and stuff. So I remember playing all the way through Pokemon Blue and Pokemon Red and Pokemon Gold and Pokemon Silver on this device when I was a teenager. And I had this right up until around late 2006, maybe early 2007, where unfortunately my original N-Gage suffered the dreaded fate known as white screen of death. At which point I took my N-Gage and I sold it to Envirophone, and they gave me a whopping £10. After that, I had various different phones that weren't gaming phones. I couldn't really trust myself getting another expensive phone, so I just had little cheapy throwaway phones like flip phones and stuff just to get me through as much as I could. Then in 2009, I actually got an N-Gage again. I picked up another N-Gage, and I was really, really happy, and I used that until 2011. I've actually got a photo of that N-Gage that I had here. You can see this. It's got a red case as a third-party case and stuff. It was really, really cool, and I used that quite a lot. And I sold that on eBay for £25. How silly of me. That was way back in 2011. Now, the reason I sold it was actually because I picked up this phone. Now this phone just might look like a relatively normal Android phone. It has, a camera and stuff, which is pretty sweet. But this phone had like a standout feature, as well as being like a pretty good little touchscreen phone, because touchscreen phones were still pretty novel at the time. The cool thing about this is it was PlayStation certified, meaning it was basically a PlayStation phone. This phone allowed you to play a whole bunch of cool games on here. So from the PlayStation Pocket, there was a whole bunch of games that were released on this that you could just play, like Crash, I think was one of the main ones. A whole bunch of PS1 games that were just kind of remade, they were just kind of ported, to the phone. And as you can see, I've kind of hacked a whole bunch of other games onto the existing PlayStation Pocket emulator, as well as using EPSXE, and I believe there's another emulator which is just as good, called FPSE. And also this was really good for Game Boy emulation and even Nintendo 64 emulation. These two little analog touch spaces here served to work and emulate analog sticks pretty well. I remember playing Super Mario 64 all the way to the end on this thing, which is pretty cool. There was also a bunch of like native Android games that worked with the gamepad in mind. So stuff like Star Battalion and Dead Space. They were games specifically designed for the Xperia Play in mind. Other games just happened to have compatibility, like Grand Theft Auto 3, Vice City, Chinatown Wars, and I do specifically remember playing San Andreas on this, but unfortunately I can't find a San Andreas that'll work on this now, as the game was delisted on this device's app store because it's very, very, very old. The coolest thing about this device that I remember mostly actually was a little app called OnLive. Now, OnLive was this really cool game streaming service. Now, you got to think to yourself, this was like 2011, 2012. I can't quite remember when OnLive started, but it was really cool. Basically, it was a game streaming service that streamed the games to your mobile device from a server, and you could either play them on your PC or on your phone with a Bluetooth controller, or the phone itself. Unfortunately, the servers for this are now long dead, meaning that that nothing will work, which is kind of sad. But I believe that OnLive got purchased by Sony and is currently used in the PlayStation streaming service. I don't quite remember the name, but there's some really interesting games for this device. I think a few of my favorites would have to be Dead Space was pretty fun because it looks amazing for the device. You've also got other stuff that was pretty good. Can't quite remember off the top. I remember there was a Minecraft Pocket Edition version, which was also pretty good. And I remember playing this game so much that my phone would constantly overheat because I was just constantly playing this game because I couldn't afford the full version on PC, which is a shame. But, you know, like, it runs really well, like surprisingly well for an Android game back in the day. A fun side note about the bridge between the Nokia N-Gage and the Xperia Play. This is the Model 2 N-Gage QD. Just going to use this because I've got it lying around currently. There's a game for this device that was really, really popular at the time. It was a fighting game called One by Digital Legends, and it's really, really advanced for the time. Features like really good advanced 3D graphics. We just load it up here for you and I'll show you. So as you can see, this game is pretty graphically advanced for the time. Lighting, shading, advanced polygons. It runs slightly better than the original N-Gage. This one's clocked at a slower speed. Yeah, like in terms of gameplay, it's pretty cool fighting game. Not necessarily a button masher. You really got to know your combinations and stuff, which I don't really know. But the linking point between this and the I'm getting my ass handed to me. The linking point between this and the Xperia Play is something really cool. So the Xperia Play also has a fairly advanced fighting game for it that came bundled with a device called Bruce Lee Dragon Fighter, and it's also by Digital Legends. Which is pretty cool. So once this game kind of starts, you'll see that there's actually quite a big crossover between this and Digital Legends' previous game, One. They look fairly similar, except that now this is kind of like a more updated version of the gameplay, this advanced 3D polygon-based fighter that's very technical, very similar in terms of like, you really got to know what you're doing. It's not a button masher. It's like definitely something that you've got to learn how to play. And again, I don't really know how to play it, but I thought it was really cool how these two devices have a game made on them by one of the same developers that kind of took the very same idea. That's pretty cool. They took the same idea and took it further on. So the N-Gage kind of, its legacy kind of lived on through the Xperia Play, through games that did that. And this is one of the very few that I think made that jump. Wow, he's kicked my ass. Anyway, back to the video. So if we look in order of phones that I had, gaming phones that I had, you know, we had the 3310/3330 with its gaming case. Then we had the Nokia N-Gage, which I had for the longest time, and then I had two of these, and then we had the Xperia Play, which I had from 2011 to 2015, and I dropped it and smashed the screen, unfortunately. And this is a new phone entirely. But when I dropped it and smashed the screen, I couldn't afford a new phone, so I just had like a standard Huawei Android phone. And I haven't had a gaming phone since. Notable things that I have seen, the Moki i7S gaming phone really piqued my interest for the longest time, but it still remains to this day to be very, very expensive, unfortunately. And I did buy a gaming tablet in, I think, 2014, 2015, which was the Arcos Gamepad 2. And I used that so much. That is an amazing handheld, but it's not a phone. It's just a tablet. But I haven't had a gaming phone since, unfortunately. I would really love them to release a new gaming phone with hardware controls or some kind of hardware controller. I did have an iPega Bluetooth controller with like a clamp on it for my phone for the longest time. But unfortunately that died, and yeah, I didn't really get much use for it. Plus, it was like having to carry like a second device. There's nothing quite like just being able to pull your phone out and play these games on the go. And much of, you know, phone games now rely on touchscreen interfaces and stuff. So there really isn't a place for sort of full-on handheld button gaming in the mobile market currently, which is a shame, because I think it's a sort of a time forgotten, which was actually pretty cool. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm sorry it's been a bit more rambly than usual. Hopefully you enjoyed this rambly video, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!